Good morning. That was beautiful. Thank you so much, Casey. And band. That was wonderful. You know, that idea of what do we hold in our minds and our hearts, which are dreams for what's to come, and what are those memories of what we've experienced? Living in that balance, This morning, I was in meditation, and it was one of those things where I was like, am I asleep? Am I meditating? I don't know. And I had this memory of when our daughter was 4 years old, and you may have seen her, she was passing out the kisses. And she used to say this thing that drove me crazy. I was very jealous. She'd say, I got my good looks from my daddy.
Amen.
Yeah. Now, my truth is actually she got her good looks from her grandmother because they look enough like they could be mother and daughter. But when we have those moments where we reflect on that, what is it that our experience and relationship imprints on our heart and souls? Whether it's a memory, whether it's a story that we've heard that maybe we were too young to remember, or perhaps it's a desire that we hold that hasn't been able to be fulfilled. Well, this morning, I invite us to talk about the divine masculine energies that are within each and every one of us. And it's the idea, if you think about it as an archetype, that there are just certain qualities that we associate as a culture with that masculinity. So neither good nor bad, but an example of this quality is strength, courage, conviction, and ambition. Now, I got to tell you, I've been in Unity circles. I was out at Unity Village with over 500 Unity leaders last week for a convention, and I know that I've been told, well, ambition's not something we do in Unity. I'm like, well, why is that? And a mentor said, and this was a person who was 50 plus years in Unity, and she simply said, because in the world, ambition has been thwarted. I said, yes. In the culture of our world, the word ambition has been molded to be seen not as a positive, uplifting, life-giving quality. And yet in Unity, how can we shift that? So we're going to talk about that this morning. And the divine feminine qualities, which also are just as important and exist within each and every one of us, are things like the nurturing spirit, the care, the compassion, the concern, and the love. And yet those are not unique to any one of us, male or female. And so the good news is they work together. They work together. And so this week, as I had the opportunity to hear a beautiful author, beautiful poet, his name is Mark Nepo. You may know him from Oprah. His most famous book is called The Book of Awakening. And honestly, I don't know if we have any in the bookstore. I apologize. But one of the things that he tells is this lovely little story about a man who was hiking from Alaska. All the way from Alaska down the map to Miami. I'm sure this was in the hitchhiking safe days. A truck comes along and says, well, I'm not going to Miami, but I'm going to Fort Lauderdale. And the man says, oh, thanks anyway, and shuts the door. Now, there are many layers to this story. This morning, what if we choose to hear that story and remember that in life, on our spiritual journey, on our spiritual unfolding, that we don't need to be so committed to perfection or to the outcome being exactly the way we thought it should, that we take ourselves away from the good. That we don't make space for a little bit of shift in what's happening. And so that's one of the filters I invite you to hear this divine masculine conversation through, because for some of us, we've had a fabulous father experience. Almost leave it to beaver kind of father experience, where we felt protected, we felt secure. For some of us, we may be experiencing an aging father, and that as our fathers age, some of that protection and some of that strength may seem to be in the background. But just because it's in the background doesn't mean it's not still here. We may be having our own experience of being a single parent, a mother and a father to children, where we get to frequently put on both hats. And remember that no matter which hat is on, whether it's the care and concern, the strength and the courage, they all weave together. They all work together within each and every one of us. So what can we do to grow, to focus, to cultivate the light energies of our divine masculine side? First thing we do, we let go of our own self-judgment. That's the very first step. That's like opening the door on the journey. We haven't even started the journey yet, but we need to open the door, and so that's letting ourselves have some of that grace and compassion and know that we're absolutely doing the best we can in any given moment of our spiritual journey. And so we may show up in relationship with another and recognize, that person reminds me of my father, and not in a good way. I was once part of a team, a board of a nonprofit, and the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer, would come in and give a report. And I remember the first 2 meetings, I was like, he's so gruff. He's all about the numbers. He's living from here to here. Could he just go to his heart? I was really critical of what was happening in my mind as I listened to him. He was also a non-hugger. I was like, And then one day it occurred to me, he's just like my dad. And in that awareness, I had a melting in my heart of, wow. And so I allowed this gentleman to be who he was and took off the mask that I was creating about certain qualities that were triggering a little part of myself that wanted my own relationship with my father to be different. And I got to have compassion with myself. And so we do that. So opening the door with that compassion, I've got 4 steps for us this morning. 4 ways that we can cultivate and feed those divine masculine energies in a positive and affirming way. And the first way is to give something freely without expecting anything in return. Without expecting anything in return. So I went to John 15:9. And it's where Jesus is speaking with his disciples, and he's giving them all kinds of little nuggets of wisdom and advice. And I love this verse, John 15:9. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Abide in my love. As the Father has loved me, as the awareness of one presence and one power that lives within us is both a part of us and it is greater than us. It's loved us. It's given freely to us. And it's what we do with it and act out in the world that makes the difference. So the first step is to give freely. I'm going to invite you to say that with me. The first step is give freely. Give freely. All right. So the second step, the second way we can cultivate this divine masculine side of ourselves is to support a loved one unconditionally. Unconditionally supporting a loved one. And it might be the loved one who's your next door neighbor that you've yet to find that love for. It might be a colleague. It might be a relative. Have you ever had an opportunity in a work situation where you knew your colleague was anxious about a meeting, or maybe they were giving a presentation, and you simply chose to be a place of support for them? I had that experience recently where I was in a meeting and my friend, he knew that some of the content we were talking about was people were passionate about it, and in that same passion could come some agendas and ambition. And I was the person who was presenting another side or a different view. And my friend simply looked at me before I was about to speak and share my perspective, and he simply said, "I support you." That's all it was. I support you. And so part of what we get to do is we get to both be that place of support, and we get to open up and receive that support. Because that's where the divine feminine, the receiving, comes in. We both offer to give freely and to extend that support. So those are our two points. Anybody think of someone from the Bible that perhaps got some support unconditionally? This is not a rhetorical question. I'm checking to be sure you're still awake. Remember the prodigal son? When he came to himself, he returned to his father's homeland, and even before he arrived, the father saw him coming, and he embraced him. Unconditional support. Unconditional support. Doesn't mean we don't still live in the world of the law of cause and effect. Remember, that young son had already taken his inheritance and spent it. And so there were those details that had to be worked out, but the unconditional support is that love. We'll hear that as a bell of affirmation. The third step we can do is to offer protection to someone. Now this really, we can think about experiences with children. I'm reminded when I worked in the public school system that many of the young people I was blessed to have in my classroom were very, very challenging behaviors. And when I could remember that the 7.5 hours that they spent at the school and the hour they spent in my classroom was probably some of the safest time in their day, because we offered structure and predictability and boundaries. And yes, there were rules, and teenagers say they don't like rules. They don't believe them. They want to know where the boundary line is, because that helps them feel safe. So we're going to give freely, right? We're going to support a loved one unconditionally, and we're going to offer protection. Another way we offer protection is when we are in connection and in relationship with each other. I was invited to a house blessing recently, and I thought, well, I don't really know what I'm going to offer. Bring some sage, we'll smudge it around the walls, around the windows. What occurred to me was, once we're in that experience of blessing something, and we get rid of, quote unquote, that which no longer serves, we've created a vacuum. So in this house blessing, after we smudged each room, we then took a candle and we went to each corner of every room and we affirmed light in that corner. The light of protection, the light of wisdom. So there's another way that we can even bring our spirituality into the way we relate with each other. The fourth thing is do something we enjoy. The fourth way to cultivate those divine masculine attributes is do something we enjoy. Bill Cosby said, "Nothing I've ever done has given me more joy and rewards than being a father to my children." And I don't know about you, but I remember Bill Cosby. I think it was on an LP, yeah, because it had that little scratch noise. And he tells this story about making chocolate cake for breakfast. And the kids would sing, "Dad is great, gives us chocolate cake." Do something you enjoy for no other agenda or reason. I may be the only one for which that's a little difficult, but I know where we live, so I imagine I'm not the only one. We get so ingrained into the patterns of our work that we forget to take that place and that space in our day or in our week to do something we really, really enjoy. So I invite you this week, because this is a how-to talk, if you hadn't figured that one out. Sometimes you come through the receiving line and I liked your inspiring words, but how do I live that? Well, this week I've given you the formula. We're going to feed and nourish our divine masculine side. We're going to give freely. We're going to offer support. We're going to offer protection, and we're going to do something that we love. May we all know that the divine masculine within us is sacred and holy. And it's the experience we've chosen to have as we're celebrating our divine destiny. Because that's our affirmation for the whole year for this church. Together we are celebrating our divine destiny. And so that's our individual lives and the spirit of this community. So you're going to join me? Yes. You're going to give it, support it, offer it, and do it. And so it is. Namaste.